guess I'll go ahead and use this microphone here. Testing. Let's get this thing over. I'm not used to using these things, so bear with me a little bit, because normally I have a loud voice and it travels, but since I'm recording, I want to use this little thing. So bear with me here. For anybody who doesn't know who I am, my name is Derek Logue, and I run the website oncefallen.com. It's an activist website full of facts and information. It's a pretty decent site, if I do say so myself. And obviously, I'm also the Reform Alabama state affiliate guy, for RSOL, at least on a temporary basis. So it gives me an opportunity to do something like this for them. I've been an activist for nearly a decade now, and of course, I feel this is very important because obviously, in any discussion about sex offenders, a lot of the same stuff tends to come up. We all hear it all the time. Sex offenders are highly likely to reoffend. There's no cure. Blah blah blah. We've heard it all, and hopefully, by the time that you leave here, you'll be able to be better armed to deal with those kinds of people when you have to confront them. News media or newspaper, or even just talking to somebody on the street. Now, I'm going to be going through a lot of material. So if by some chance I'm going too fast and you want to write something down, let me know, because I really get into these things sometimes. And sometimes when I get started, I'm a big man, so it takes me a little while to slow down. So you got to bear with me here. So just say, hey, I need that up for a second. But, if it gets to be too much and you're tired of taking notes and you want to just enjoy it, then I'll make my notes available after the presentation. If you got a flash drive or something, or an email address, I can send it to you. It'll also be available on oncefallen.com on my sex offender myths page after the conference is over, when I get back to Cincinnati, so it'll be a few days. I did not bring that computer with me, so bear with me. I'll go ahead and get started here. A myth is not necessarily something that is untrue. A myth is just a set of beliefs that people have about a particular group or a particular item. In our society, obviously, there's a huge sex offender stereotype. I'm sure when you say sex offender, what's the first thing that pops up in somebody's mind? Yeah, pedophile, wrinkly trench coat, candy waver, carrying a puppy, and riding a rusty old van or something. It's a stereotype. Some of them are, some myths are untrue, and some of them are somewhat based in fact. And we're of course going to separate myth from fact in this. There's three types of lies. You got regular lies, you got damned lies, and you got statistics. Well, we're going to be covering a lot of statistics, and it's like, it's a popular saying, I don't know where it came from. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the origin of that particular myth, but you hear it a lot, and a lot of people don't want to hear the facts. They want, there's this attitude of, don't confuse it with the facts. I made up my mind. But, arming yourself with the facts is pretty important. Like I said before, some of the myths, they're not fiction. Some things that I'm going to say are actually true, completely true. It's all about how you present the myth, to present the fact, to determine whether it's myth or not. And we'll get into that here in a second. I'm not going to read all this. I'm not going to read all this stuff to you, but it's a newspaper article from NPR back in 2007. And long story short, even politicians get their facts from the same place that everybody gets, from the same place as everybody else, from the news media. The politicians watch the nightly news just like the rest of us, and that's where they get most of their information. So, I'll go ahead. That's all right. I'll get you back later on for that one. But like I said, they don't even, most of the time politicians don't read this stuff. I don't know what any of y'all's experience has been with looking at a bill, but if you ever get bored and you're insomniac and you want something to put you to sleep, Go pull up the Adam Walsh Act, all 150-something pages of the Adam Walsh Act, start reading. And you understand why a lot of politicians don't read this junk. That's where we come in, because most of the politicians get their information from sound bites, just like the rest of us. Watch the news media, special interest groups come in and do this stuff. So, you know, they don't even read reports that they fund. They'll fund a commission to go in, pay researchers thousands of dollars, and then they don't even read the report. They'll click on CNN and see what Nancy Grace has to say about it, or John Walsh, or Mark Lunsford. But you know, before we get into the actual myths themselves, I just want to take a moment to, you know, point out a few common logical fallacies here. You know, some of these you're probably familiar with. You probably don't know the names of them. You know, I'll just machine gun down. You know, ad hominem, easiest one to remember. It's personal attack. You know, they'll say, you know, stuff like, oh, all you sex offenders are all pedophiles, you know. Appeals to emotion, that's the other big one. You know, you get a crying Mark Lunsford, you know, testifying before a committee. It's really hard to undo that. Not impossible, just difficult. Because emotions do draw a lot, have been the cause of a lot of these laws. Ad ignoratum, that's a fancy way of just saying you can't prove it or disprove it. You know, the best example will be the underreporting myth. You know, they'll say, oh, you can't, we don't know how many people don't report sex crimes. You know, so it could be anything. You can't unprove it, so it, you know, it's a stalemate kind of thing. You know, appeal to authority, another easy one. You know, quoting Oprah, quoting John Walsh or somebody. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. I love all this Latin stuff. It just simply means because something happened after the fact, it happened because of this. And then, you know, so the best example for that is in 1993, the crime rate started going down. About that time was when they passed the Jacob Wetterling Act. So because the crime rate was going down since 1994, the Jacob Wetterling Act must have had impact. Not necessarily true. You know, but just, you know, it's too casual, it's coincidence, but, you know, the assumption, of course, is that, you know, because this happened, this had to be the reason. It could have been a million things. Red herring, that's another popular one people love to use, you know, throwing up a different topic, you know, that sounds a lot like the top to sort of confuse you. You know, if you don't vote for this Senate Farm Bill, then you're a pro-pedophile because there's a pedophile, you know, there's an anti-sex offender law provision. We heard this a few years ago with the Adam Shepard hate crimes bill. You remember that they called it the, quote, Pedophile Protection Act in an attempt to try to get it from passing. It still passed, by the way. They actually added it to the National Defense Spending Bill, but anyways, I'm kind of going off on a tangent there. Another easy one, cherry picking. We get that a lot. They love to take a statistic out of a huge report, and they will focus on one particular part of a bill or a particular study as opposed to the entire thing. So it's important to, you know, sometimes go back and read the entire article and see what it, you know, to read the source and see what it says. The moving the goalpost, you know, that's just simply say, you know, you're reaching an unattainable goal. Easiest example, you know, if it harms even one child, then it's one child too many. You know, that's a good example of it. Straw man arguments, it's a lot like, you know, it's a lot like the red herrings. You know, the reoffending is high because pedophiles are clever and most go undetected. So that means your recidivism rates that you quote are invalid. That's what they claim anyways. Can't really say it, twistitics. Now I'm from the South, sometimes I can't pronounce these crazy words. It's, you know, another way of saying is false light. You know, what I said earlier, some facts are actually true facts, but because it's just shown in a different light. And of course, data soup is just, I just came up with that one. You know, I'm sure there's a different word for it. I made it up as I went along, just like half of the people that get on the TV. So they're rubbing off on me, I guess. It's just throwing a bunch of loosely related stats together. You know, I saw this one on one of the various websites I was checking out. Sex is the #1 search term online. Porn is a $20 billion a year industry. The average sex offender commits 117 sex crimes. Anybody can explain to me what those three have in common? Nothing, really. You know, what does the porn industry have to do with sex offenders? What does what people search with online have to do with sex offenders? Absolutely nothing, but it's thrown out there because it scares the living crap out of people. And, you know, and again, it's, you know, it's effective because obviously it works. So anyways, now we'll get into the 12.
You know, Mr. Logue, I'm getting a bit tired of the fact that at this convention so far, and by the way, this is nothing more than a pedo cluster convention as far as I can make out. I'm Bill Blathers, and I'm with a radio show called Molester Mondays, and I'm undercover here as a sex offender, but in reality, my radio program, time and time again, has demonstrated that this movement is nothing more than a cover for a international pedo trafficking of minor children. That's what it's all about. So the reason I'm here today is to prove you wrong, Mr. Logue. I've encountered you on my radio program time and time again. Your lies, and your damn lies over and over again. And I'm going to start out this method right now and tell you something. The biggest lie of them all, that sex offenders have low reoffense rates. Well, that's been proven wrong. I happen to know a sheriff in my hometown county. He tells me that the myth of low reoffense rates is wrong, that in fact 99% of sex offenders reoffend within a year. And that's for every single one of them that's ever been dead or alive. Now, let's see you handle that one, Mr. Logue.
You know, one thing I want to know, Mr. Blathers, is how the heck did you manage to get out of that civil commitment center they put you in? Anyways, you know, let's jump into, you know, here's a good example of the myth in action. You know, the risk of recidivism posed by sex offenders is frightening and high. The bad news is this came from Smith versus Doe, that horrible law where the United States Supreme Court basically ruled that that the registry was, you know, it was regulatory, not punitive. Well, you know, that's a huge problem because now that it's an established legal fact, you know, whatever was claimed to be, you know, the high recidivism rate, you know, they accept it as fact. Once something becomes legally established as a fact, whether it's true or not, it's really hard to undo. That's the reason why tomatoes are called vegetables, even though botanically they're called fruits, because of a legal precedent. I know it's kind of weird, but that, you know, sometimes just because something is a legal standard doesn't make it right. So, unfortunately, you know, recidivism is a huge topic. You know, unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand what recidivism is. You know, I'm sure most of you guys, you know, we have a pretty simplified definition up here. You know, it just means the rate at which a person convicted of a crime commits another crime. Well, you know, it's kind of basic, but the problem is there's a whole huge array of ways you can look at recidivism. Are we looking at reoffense rates? Are we looking at reconviction rates? Are we looking at self-reporting? Are we looking at reincarceration rates, probation violations? You know, and also are we looking at, you know, what kind of recidivism are we talking about? You know, so there's many different, obviously the more, you know, the larger the definition, the broader scope of the definition, the higher the number you're going to get. So you can get some really ridiculous numbers if you want to tweak and play around with it all day. Personally, you know, just my opinion here, reconviction rates to me are the gold standard, because reconviction rates, at least you have you have a pretty good understanding, you know, that this person's probably guilty, you know, more than likely. You know, so, you know, anything else above that, a person gets rearrested at any time. You know, they could be arrested because their tail light is out or something. They just want to screw with the sex offender, you know. It happens. Is this thing even on anymore?
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay. It's just a little lower. Okay.
It's just not pointing to you.
Yeah, okay. You know, first of all, well, I understand there's two different kinds of recidivism. Sometimes, you know, general baseline recidivism, or, you know, sometimes it's just called recidivism. This is why this gets so complicated. They don't even have a set term for this stuff. But we'll just say for sake of simplicity, recidivism. I mean, a sex offender goes out and robs a bank, or he kicks somebody's cat or something, and he gets arrested. You know, recidivism, he just got arrested for any kind of offense. Probation violation, you know, failure to pay his registry fee or something like that. You know, the one that people think of when they hear recidivism is what we more likely call reoffense, or sometimes called specific or sexual recidivism. And obviously that means, you know, he committed a new sex crime. Of course, exacerbating that problem is the fact that some studies that I have read actually add the charge of failure to register as a sex offender as a sex offense. So that really does not help understand the numbers any better. Next one here. Now, I'm sure most of you guys who are activists are very familiar with the U.S. Department of Justice. What's the U.S. Department of Justice say? What's the reoffense rate?
3.5.
To 5.3.
5.3, 3.5. Okay. You know, for the benefit of anybody who hasn't seen this study before, you know, in 1994 they released, 9,641 sex offenders in 15 states. Here we go, you know, here comes the discrepancy, 3.5, 5.3. 5.3 of sex offenders were rearrested within that 3-year period. And out of those, you know, and out of the 3.5% were reconvicted. What I say before, you know, reconviction to me is the gold standard. So 5.3 recidivism rate might actually be overstating it because, you know, so nearly a third of these guys who were arrested were not convicted. So that, you know, it sort of begs the question, you know, what was the reasons why? Did the person truly get away with a crime, or perhaps maybe, you know, maybe it's been a witch hunt? Who knows? We don't know the answer to that. So, you know, it's all a semantic argument, but it all comes down to setting a universal standard and going with it. And to me, reconviction, at least you have definitive proof, because look, we're adding a third of people who may be innocent to the recidivism rates. You know, I mean, it happens a lot. I don't know if anybody still has this handout. This is one that was given out last year. Nice green handout here. I didn't see it, but if you got one of them, that's great. If you don't, then I scanned it onto my flash drive, and if anybody wants it, get at me later and I'll send it to you. But the Advocates for Change, the Colorado group that's here.
It's us.
Yes, that's y'all. Then you should be familiar with this, because this is what y'all gave out last year.
3.5.
Yeah, you got one of these. You still got one of these floating around?
Well, I think we have some brochures out of the
Yeah.
table. It wasn't out there.
I didn't see one, but that doesn't mean you didn't have it. But if you guys happen to have one, they did a pretty good breakdown of, like, I don't know, what is it, 27 studies from 24 states and countries involving 69,307 registrants, and followed for an average of 4.2 years, found that 3.68% were convicted of a new sex offense. Notice I don't know if you guys caught that, but I try not to use the term sex offender that much, because, you know, it also buys into the stereotype. You know, if there's nothing else I want you guys to get from all my ranting up here, is that you know, semantics are a very important part of what we do as Mythbusters. You know, you know, I don't like to say the term pedophile. I don't like to say the term sex offender as much as possible. I say the term registrant, a registered person, former offender. You can take your pick. I generally say registered person or registered citizen for the sake of simplicity, or registrant for short. So I try to avoid that as much as possible. Factors affecting recidivism rates. Obviously, this is something that's very important. The longer a person's out, the less likely this person is to reoffend. You know, Harris and Hansen, I'll be quoting them a lot. I'm not really crazy about their study because their number seems a little high, but I think that the reason that the Harris and Hansen studies numbers are so high is because the Canada and the United States have way different methods of determining sex offenses, and I think that probably has a lot to do with it. There's more of a screening process in Canada than in the States. We're a lot more likely to throw relatively minor offenders on the registries as opposed to Canada. So that may have a lot to do with it. But the short answer, he found, if you've been out for 15 years in prison and he started doing this study, he only found 4% of them reoffend, as opposed to somebody who'd only been out 5 years and the reoffense rate was like 7%. So there's a difference. So the longer a person's out, the more likely this person is, he's not going to be a problem. So, of course, by contrast, the time that a person is most likely to reoffend is within the first couple of years after that person gets out. So, of those who reoffended in Ohio, 2/3 of them did so within the first 3 years of release. To me, I would say that's a pretty good argument for treatment programs, halfway houses, transitional housing. We had the circles of support and accountability. We had all that stuff earlier. But unfortunately, it's not being utilized like it should. It's to me, that's a huge, this is huge. They should be talking more about this. But they're doing it the wrong, well, they talk about it, but they do it the wrong way, of course. Obviously, there are huge differences in types of sex offenders. Some are more likely to reoffend than others. We're not a homogenous group. If this is just for individuals who are bona fide, these statistics are just for bona fide individuals who actually touched somebody, committed a real sex crime, not your public urinators or whatnot. But, you have boy victim, not stranger type molesters, very small subgroup of the population commit a very high number of crimes. Now, I'm a criminal justice student. I have a degree in criminal justice. And one of the first things they taught me when I went to college was about 10% of criminals commit 90% of the offenders. A lot of the things that we focus on are that very small subgroup. The only problem is that we have a tendency to look at everybody as a homogenous group. We're not homogenous. We're a very diverse group. There's a huge difference between incest offenders and the boy victim stranger types or the rapists. But even then, that's not a guarantee. A lot of individuals still, this is still well below 50%. Even the highest recidivism number over a 15-year period, we're still talking about roughly 2/3 of individuals not reoffending. And of course, with extended incest offenders, we're talking more like, we're talking about, about 9 of every 10 not reoffending. So there's a huge discrepancy there. A person who has 2 or more convictions is, they're more likely to reoffend than somebody who did a one-time thing. Because most of us do have, experience something called one-time learning. Okay, I'm a registrant. I've been on the registry for 10 years, and I haven't reoffended. I'm a one-time offender, so, my recidivism rate's obviously a lot lower, and of course I don't have any inclination to go out and reoffend, so, there's not a problem with me going out and, or anything, but, if I had three or more offenses, then there'd probably be a far better chance that I'd be out there more likely to do it again, so, that's, I want to mention too that these studies, if you guys been trying to write these down, these are cumulative rates, and I'm about to explain it because there's actually been a pretty decent amount of confusion over what do I mean by cumulative. It just means total. You got 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. That's a cumulative total. It's like it defies the law of gravity. It goes up, it never goes down. They get these studies. These are 5-year increments. So the problem is, and I've seen this happen. This is why I'm making such a big deal out of this. I threw this up one time, and somebody took 14, 20, and 24 and added them together, and thought that was the 15-year recidivism rate.
Wow.
I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to degrade anybody, but come on. We live in a nation where we put disclaimers on jars of peanut butter, letting people know that there's peanuts inside. You know, you got to remember what kind of country we live in here. So you have to actually spend a lot of time explaining this stuff to people. You know, so I want you, you know, rather than just drone on and on, you know, I've got a chart here. This kind of helps. You know, this is what I mean by cumulative. You see, it goes up, it's up, it's up. You know, it looks scary. It looks scary, but let's look at the. You know, but I took the liberty of taking the numbers that was given to me, and I made a non-cumulative chart, and you'll see a difference in reoffense rates at this point. And you can see, you know, most people are going to, since most people reoffend within the first few years, you can see after that, you know, after this initial spike here, all of a sudden it goes down significantly. So all these numbers, you have, you know, 3%, 4% after 10 or 15 years, that makes a huge difference. So, you know, that's a lot less, you know, that is kind of a lot less scary than that, you know. So that's a huge difference. Now, before we get into the other part, there's two huge, really bad studies that you guys need to be aware of, because sometimes the opposition loves to use this. The first one, this is the one that Smith versus Doe used, and this is going to come up from time to time. The infamous Prentke study. This is the one that claims a 52% recidivism rate. First of all, you have to know that this is an estimate number, and estimates are estimates, especially when you're not taking into account, you know, the recidivism curve that I showed you, the non-cumulative totals. You know, it consisted of, and the problem was, the sample was of individuals who were in civil commitment centers, not indicative of the entire population of registered, but individuals who meet all those criteria that I talked about, the ones that were the most likely to reoffend. Individuals who had clinical diagnosis of pedophilia, who had committed multiple offenses, and who were in civil commitment centers. And even then, he had to make an estimate of the amount of those who reoffended. That's not an accurate number. And the individual who wrote this study, Mr. Prentke himself, even stated that this number was not indicative of sex offenders as a whole. So if the author comes out and says it, why is nobody recognizing that? The other one was even crazier. This is the Ron Langevin study, claims a 90 to 94% reoffense rate over 25 years. This one's a little more recent, and every once in a blue moon you'll see this one pop up too. The problem with this study was he went back 25 years on individuals that came from a particular center, and back then the notes, or the records that we kept of people weren't quite as great. After 15 years, if a person didn't reoffend, obviously there was no more record of this person. So he took out all those individuals that he could not find records for, and then you're left with individuals that he could find records for because they reoffended. So essentially you come up with near 100% of recidivists recidivated, you know. That's, yes, I mean, it's...
Well, it's true. It is. It's true.
100%, yeah. You know what? That's technically true. 100% of recidivists recidivated. You know, even Mr. Blathers over here agrees. You know.
Give me that microphone when you're ready, buddy.
You know. Come on, Blathers.
If you kind people would ever tune into my radio program, Molester Mondays, airing April 1st every year, April 1st through October 30th, you realize that right before Halloween, you realize that sex offenders reoffend 4 times higher than any other criminal class imaginable. 4 times, but you people don't tune in. That means you don't care about your kids. Get out of that one, Mr. Low Reoffense Rates.
This guy. You know, talk show hosts are 4 times more likely to get things wrong than the average citizen. You realize that? Yeah. Anyways, this is one of those that's technically true. Now, you know, unfortunately, it's been misquoted. This is McCoon versus Lyle was actually, was citing the same U.S. Department of Justice. This is the one that we love so much, that wonderful 3.5 after 3-year rate that we love pointing at. This is part of it. And it's kind of true. It is true. This is one of those false light statements. You know, it's true, but people misuse it. And, you know, it's all about putting things in perspective. as we mentioned before, 9,641 sex offenders, registrants, got out, and 517 were rearrested within 3 years. But that same year, they also looked at 262,420 non-sex offenders. And 1.3% of them committed sex crimes within 3 years of being released from prison. Only problem is, you got a large group, you got a large number down here, 3,228 non-sex offenders in that same time period committed sex crimes. So that's a rate of 6 to 1 in case you don't feel like doing the math. So it's all about putting things in perspective. Look at, are we going to start registering all criminals now? Because, that's a lot of sex crimes. That's more than that 3,228 is a little bit bigger than 517, don't you think?
We need more jails.
The thing is, there's always a small subcategories of sex, any kind of criminal who specialize. So yeah, there's going to be some sex offenders who are going to go out and commit sex crimes. The good news is that, they do it at a lower rate than other criminals who specialize. Burglars, that's about 4 times the rate of sex offenders. Drugs, about 3 times. Robbery, twice as much. Thankfully, with the large number of individuals who are on the registries, only commit crimes one time, because we're already far lower. We've already established that we have a far lower rate of recidivism here. It's great to know also that, the amount of specialization is a lot lower than they claim.
Mr. Lowe, give me that microphone. Give me that microphone. Now, I have something to tell you. Everybody knows that if you want to protect your kids, what you do is you get out that internet, go up online and find out them ugly faces and them ugly sex offenders online. That's the best way to protect your kids. Everybody knows that. Why don't you?
Well, I try to protect my children online. I don't let them watch the Bill Blathers show. The beauty of the registry is, we can go look up all these faces online. It's obviously it's hard to memorize all 750,000 people, but I think what Bill Blathers is kind of alluding to here is the good old stranger danger myth. You guys have heard this one a million times. This one's older than anybody in the room, even older than Mr. Blathers over here. This is from the 1930s right here. It shows you how the old stereotype when I was talking about the old trench coat. That's the Nazi era picture, so they're picking the Jew as a sex offender, candy, trying to swipe up the little children. The FBI in the 1950s had a little poster where they would, there are little coloring books where they get the little kiddies to color in the monster and warn them about don't take candy from strangers. This one has pretty well been debunked. And of course, it still comes up a lot. So, here again, this is one that you really need to be familiar with. The National Incident Studies of Missing, Abducted, Runaway, and Throwaway Children, or NESMART for short. There were 797,500 missing children reports in 2002. Of all those, 115 of those are your, quote, stereotypical kidnappings, the ones that you see on the TV, the ones that Mr. Blathers would exploit for ratings. Of those, 45 went permanently missing and dead. But look, I just broke this down just for this isn't quite all that important, but most of these numbers, 340,000, that's almost half of them right there. Benign reasons. They just, mother simply panicked because Junior wasn't in the backyard. Turned out Junior was inside playing Nintendo, or hiding under the bed or something. We see those a lot. Runaways. They got injured while playing in the woods or something. And they were crying out for help and they weren't seen for a couple hours. I mean, a missing person report is a missing person report. It doesn't mean anything,
Can I?
In 2000, yes.
Do you have room for a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. And I don't want to, I sort of appreciate the lightness that you're bringing to this, but I also feel that there's something that I want to say here about the context, which you're also saying. And that is that for any of these, I don't think that just we're less of a problem than. I think that there's problems that people are worried about. And so that when we look at the benign reasons, there's a lot of people that are freaked out about their children right now. So we kind of want to see there's a lot of reasons that children are at risk, but that where it's all being placed is in this group where the risk is actually small.
Right. Well, that's why I'm trying to, I was about to, I'm showing this little chart here, we're trying to put things into proper perspective. Okay. All these big numbers, they love to use big numbers to scare people. But, let's put things in context. 2002, remember that 45 number. 73.1 million kids under age 18 lived in this country in 2002. And of those, 45 were permanently missing or killed, in their stereotypical kidnapping fashion. Your odds are one in about 1.6 million up here. That's a pretty, it's a very small number. That's, and to put things in perspective, in 2010, 77 kids died from choking death on a hot dog. That's not even kids under age 18. That was like, I think it was like under 12. So there were more kids getting killed by hot dogs than by sex offenders. So, I just kind of threw a little rhetorical question, should we register Oscar Mayer? He's obviously a threat to children because he's killed more than a sex offender has. Yeah, it's, I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but, it's, you have to look at it from the context, hey, your chances of that happening is minuscule. And even when it happens, it's not even a guarantee that it's a sex offender, because we're going to get into all that here, before this presentation is over with, that the vast majority of sex crimes are committed by somebody who's not on the registry. We'll get to that statistic. I just don't remember what it is. In regards to stranger danger, I just kind of turned this into chart form to make it just a little bit easier to kind of digest. The red is the stranger crimes. This over here is victims under age 18. As you can see, it's pretty much almost dead even between parents and family, or friends and acquaintances. When you get into adults, it's a little bit different, obviously, because there's more rape and not, molestation type offenses. Another chart kind of broke it down even. The younger a victim is, the more likely that the person that molested them, violated them, is somebody who's a friend, a family member or acquaintance. See that, this is the age 6 or younger here. Only 1.8% were strangers, and when you get up to this teenage years, you see it gets a little bit higher. So it's more, it's more about, knowing the context. Strangers is a very small part of it. Friends and family are far more likely to be the perpetrators in these types of cases. This chart's a little bit more confusing, but most juvenile sex crimes are committed by juveniles. So this is the offender age, and this is the victim age. And as you can see, 42% of victims under age 7, their perpetrator was under age 18. 43% from age 7 to 11, and your teenage years, you have about 30%. Many sex crimes are being committed by juveniles, although, it's debatable whether or not we're talking about like bona fide sex offenses or more, slightly older kid playing doctor or taking advantage of a younger kid without knowing the full context of their sexuality, It's kind of, but it's something that we don't talk about an awful lot. And this is what I was getting into earlier. Most sex crime arrests, first-time offenders. This is your green are first-time offenders, your red are recidivists. Make it a little simple here. Here's your sexual molestation. 5.9% were recidivist, where 94.1% were first-timers. About the same number for rape. Vast majority of sex crimes are committed by somebody who's never committed a sex crime before in his life, or at least is not on the current registry. And that's why the focus should be a little bit more on, prevention programs rather than focusing on the sex offender registry.
You should be absolutely arrested for your abuse of the English language. Now, everybody knows that people in this room have people that you want to care for, especially children, Why is it that you use this euphemism called sex offender instead of calling them what they really are, pedophiles and predators, Mr. Logue?
Oh, God. Every time I hear the P word, it just really, it's like nails to chalkboard to me. I'm surprised you didn't just try to put the two together and say pedophile and be done with it. But that's what happens when we don't practice before the show. So anyways, you see this all the time, the interchanging of the term sex offender and pedophile. It annoys the living crap out of me, and I'm sure it does to each and every one of you too. You know, there's hundreds of these little examples. People think it's interchangeable. This is semantic argument here. Let's get this out of the way. Pedophile is a clinical term. You can be diagnosed as a pedophile, but you cannot be convicted in a court of law for having pedophilia. Because pedophilia is not a crime, it is a clinical diagnosis. Sex offender is a legal term. Sex offender can mean public urination. It can mean indecent exposure. It can mean sexting. You know, it could also mean molestation and rape. You know, it could mean that somebody was just over the age of consent, somebody just under the age of consent. Sex offender is such a broad term. It's also a legal term. You can be a pedophile without being a registered sex offender. You can be a registered sex offender without being a pedophile. Anybody confused by that? Unfortunately, yeah, his eyes are glazed over here. Yeah, unfortunately, you know, I've gotten every one of these terms called. I've been called each and every one of these. Kid effer was one of my favorites. Russia Today did that to me, by the way. I'll never watch it again. But only a very small portion of convicted sex offenders against minors are preferentially attracted to children. You know, in spite of this fact, the term people typically use the term pedophile interchangeably with child molester, sex offender, abuser, rapist. You know, again, like I said, you could be a pedophile and never commit a crime against a child. Having an inclination is not the same as committing a crime. Two different things. You know, here's your clinical diagnosis of pedophilia in the DSM manual. Is over a period of 6 months, recurrent intense sexual arousing fantasies, sexual urges, or behaviors involving sexual activity with a prepubescent child, and that person has acted on these sexual urges, or these sexual urges or fantasies cause marked distress or interpersonal difficulty, and the person is at least 16 years old, at least 5 years older than the child, or children in criterion A do not include an individual in late adolescence involved in an ongoing sexual relationship with a 12 or 13-year-old. Of course, if anybody is a regular news watcher, you know, keeping up with sex offender stuff, you probably heard about Caitlin Hunt. You know, 18 years old, had consensual sex with a 14-year-old girl, sitting in Florida jail right now. You know, it seems like she's kind of broke a lawsuit there, you know, with not having contact with the alleged victim before trial. So, you know, would she meet this clinical diagnosis of pedophilia or not? She's 18. Her victim is 14. Yes, it's only 4 years. That's
Really?
yes. Other doors open, people. So, much time is wrong? How much time I got? What time are we supposed to stop? 5. Okay, I better start getting the move on because I'm on number 4 here. Situational offenders. You know, you need to understand there is a difference between a preferential, fixated offender and a situational. The vast majority of sex offenders are situational offenders. They are individuals who are not primarily attracted to children, but who committed a sex crime under duress. I fall under the situational offender category. I did what I did because I was, and it's not making excuses. I'm just saying for the purpose of identification here that I had specific circumstances that caused a lot of stress in my personal life, and I made a poor decision based upon that and chose to act on it. So it's on me. But I'm not clinically diagnosed as a pedophile. I do not have a preferential, I'm not sexually attracted to children. you know, human nature allows us to do things that are contrary to our nature, and it's not excusing it, but we have to understand that these things, you know, that there's the possibility that these things can happen in order for us to be able to say that, hey, you know, we've got to look at how to prevent these things from occurring in the proper context. Because when we're so fixated, pun intended here, we're fixated on the fixated. You know, we're obsessed with the obsessed. And that, you know, it kind of blinds us to the bigger picture, because a lot of us don't fit into this wonderful little mold down here. The people that aren't amenable to treatment, the people who don't want help, the people who feel like everything that, you know, that everything they do is just right, you know, and they're not doing anything wrong. So, you know, it's clouding us to the greater picture. That's why we have to stamp out this pedophile versus sex offender issue once and for all. You know, there's not really a lot of statistics on how many sex offenders are clinically diagnosed with pedophilia, but this one from Montana found that 4% of individuals in their prisons were clinically diagnosed.
Hey, that's my neighborhood right there, look.
Yeah,
The reason we call them pedophiles is they can't be cured, Mr. Logue. Why don't you know that?
Oh. So
They can't be cured.
Yeah, well, maybe they can be educated, like, hopefully you will be by the time this is over with. Yeah, we've heard this one so many times. You can't cure those guys, you know, they got a disease. You know, it's kind of an interesting quagmire, this particular one, because the assumption is, first of all, you have an incurable illness. All sex offenders have curable illness. You all have these inclinations. It's beyond your control, but, you know, obviously it means, you know, we all pose an equally high risk because of that. So a lot of these myths, it's more like a tangled web. They're not an island unto themselves. They're interchangeable with each other. So, you know, they all pose a high risk. Of course, that's not necessarily true. As we talked about earlier, I'm just going to throw a couple quick examples up here that we have found that there has been successful treatment programs. Here in Ohio, where I live at, those who got treatment have 65% decrease in sexual reoffense rates. That's pretty impressive number. 65% is pretty good. There's some even better than that. Lady was talking earlier about CASA. This particular study was 2 years prior to the one that the lady that was from CASA earlier mentioned. This particular study found a 70% lower recidivism rate through circles of support and accountability. So, you know, these are impressive numbers. To say that, you know, we can't reduce the recidivism rate, you know, it's all about reduction, not elimination. You can't truly eliminate 100% of everything. You know, we've wiped out, you know, it's not, you know, you can't look at, I don't think calling it a disease is adequate, because, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of diseases you can't cure. You can't cure the common cold. But you can manage the symptoms. You can do whatever you can to eliminate the number of times that a person, you know, you can really make yourself eat healthy, you know, take your vitamins, don't do certain things, and you'll be less likely to get sick. You know, we do little things like that. It's a semantic argument, I know, but you know, it's an important one. You know, here's just another one. That's from the same Montana one. You know, these are relatively small numbers, but you know, treatment reduces general recidivism as well as it does reoffense. So, you know, they cut general recidivism in half in their program and sexual recidivism by 90%. So that, you know, these are impressive numbers. You know, you can't say the treatment doesn't work. You know, we're eliminating a lot of crime right here simply by giving these individuals the opportunity. As I said before, you know, we use the term treatment rather than cure. Most people are amenable to treatment. You know, one-time learning. You know, you went to prison, you got embarrassed, you got treated, you got out. You're not going to go out and do it again. Most of them. You know, I talk about there's some good programs and there's bad ones. Just because I say treatment, you have to talk about the right kind of treatment. Shaming kinds of treatments. Shaming does not work. If you guys know your history, you should know that 300 years of persecution of a particular religious group did not stop that religious group from becoming one of the major world religions in this world. And I'm not trying to proselytize anybody. I'm just speaking historically here. But we used to feed Christians to the lions. We hung them upside down on crosses. We fed, we would impale them and do all this other stuff. Did it stop it from happening? No. Shaming, persecuting, sometimes backfires. A lot of these programs, it's not about shaming the offender. It's about making them
About profit
realize
motive, profit motive.
profit motive. No, it's not about profit motive. Nice try though, but it's all about a good program. Makes the individual feel like he's a part of his own treatment. You're not just dictating to him. You're not making him feel, not just making him feel miserable. Yeah, there is some element of shame. Nobody wants to sit up here and admit they're a sex offender. When I go on TV and I do an interview, do I want to say, hey, I'm a sex offender? No, I don't want to do that. Nobody does. But we got to get beyond that. The person's got to feel like he's a person. They got to feel like that I have support. That accountability is only part of it, but I also want support. I also want to be able to talk about my problems with somebody. And that's why groups like CASA and a lot of these other places, those are good programs. I was so grateful to have her here earlier. We got to go move on here. So,
Don't worry. All right, Mr. Logue, there's one thing that you can do besides throwing around all those numbers, and that is the fact that each sex offender that has ever lived has at least 191 victims, whether reported or not. Get out of that one, Mr. Know-It-All.
oh Lord, I think Mr. Blathers is victimizing a couple of dozen people right now. Wonderful. Sex offenders have hundreds of victims. The average serial child molester has between 360 and 380 victims in his lifetime. That came from, I got this off Parents for Megan's Law. So take it for what it's worth. Now, this is where the myth busting starts getting a little bit fancy. I had to do a lot of digging and digging and digging. And as far back as I've been able to get is a study from Gene Abel entitled Self-Reported Sex Crimes of Non-Incarcerated Paraphiliacs. I can guarantee you, if somebody looked at that word, what do you think they're going to think that word means? Paraphiliacs. Does anybody know what the word paraphiliac means? Anybody? It means sexual deviance in general. Anything that's not accepted as the norm of society. When Gene Abel did this study in 1986, consensual homosexual sex was considered deviant sexual behavior for the purposes of this study. So that really isn't going to help with the numbers. Problems with the study, few of the offenders are voluntary. When you have a captive audience and you expect them to tell you what you want to hear in order to graduate from the program, what do you think you're going to hear? You're going to hear a lot of what you want to hear. I already talked about the inclusion of non-criminal activities such as homosexual relations. Plus, even so, this is an estimate, another estimate. Estimates are bad. But through coercion and varying degrees of compliance, repeated acts are often carried out with the same victims or partners. So even Gene Abel himself admits the chances of somebody having 100, 200, 380 victims is actually pretty low. This is what you remember math class when you thought, oh, you're never going to take all this stupid math again? Well, guess what? You're getting a math lesson today, y'all. Means. I made it a little bit easier for you guys. That way I don't have to, spend all day talking about. Means average. So if you've got, you see some pretty big numbers. This one's really good here. Mean number of victims for male victim, sex offenders with male victims, 150.2. Well, median means halfway. So literally, like you go down the highway, there's that thing in the middle of a 4-lane highway is called a median for a reason, because it's halfway. That means half of the people in this survey, in his little survey, had less than 4 victims. But yet you have this incredibly huge number. There's a huge discrepancy between half of them didn't even contribute to the overall number. So, he throws some astronomical number out there, but yet over 50% of them didn't even commit even 5% of what this, they didn't commit 5% of what he's claiming. So there's a small number of individuals who commit a huge number of crimes, and it pulls up the average. It would be like having Barry Bonds on a team of Pee-wee baseball people. He's going to hit a home run every time. But the other kids, they're probably going to be like the Bad News Bears, and stuff. But that average is going to stay up because Barry Bonds is coming to bat every ninth time. It's the law of averages. Again, Gene Abel. Here's another number. Now it's gone down to 100. It's gone to 117. What I found interesting is somebody quoted this particular study. There's only one little problem. This study no longer exists. Nobody can find the original copy. Not even Gene Abel. Okay, but yeah, I mean, it's an unsolved mystery. I need Robert Stack on this. What I found interesting is later on, Gene Abel writes his book, and now you see 11.7. 117, 11.7. Coincidence? Hey, these things happen. It happens a lot more than y'all realize. It's a cute little example, but I think this happens an awful lot. And now you start to see a little bit more realistic numbers from the same person who quoted 170 from 200 and something all the way back here, 360 to 380. Now he's going down to 2.9 children, 11.7. I mean, these are a lot smaller numbers. It's all perspective. The latest in technology, all that stuff, whatever you want to contribute to. There's one more that I want to mention, and that's there's another study that floats around by Sean Aylmeyer, I guess that's how you pronounce his name, and he throws another ridiculous number up there. But what I mentioned earlier about inmates being stuck in a program where you're compelled to tell them what they want to hear. Well, with polygraphs, it adds a whole new dimension to all this because polygraphs influence people. A lot of times when you take a person who takes a polygraph exam, this is a study from, see a familiar name up there, Levinson. She's part of this study. Clients taking a polygraph test will just simply go along with whatever the polygrapher asks them. Did you touch that child? If the polygrapher believes that person did it, then he's expecting the answer to be yes. And if that person says no, then the polygrapher is going to say he's lying. The polygraph does not actually do anything. It's a stress detector. It's like those silly little things that you see sometimes. Not trying to knock anybody's religion, so if you're a Scientologist, I'm not trying to knock you guys, but those little stress test things. I don't know how they work or whatever, but if they do work, I don't know if they do or not, but if they work, they detect stress. Stress doesn't mean anything. It's still open to interpretation. Just like most everything else I've been talking about. A lot of people take these numbers and interpret them. There's Mr. Abel right there.
Can I say something?
Yes.
On that first report, because Kim English and Peggy Heil, those are all people from Colorado. And this year they're doing, the legislature has authorized $100,000 to do an independent study of our sex offender management board, of which they're part of. So they're coming under scrutiny this year. It's within the next couple of months.
It kind of makes me nervous thinking that they're going to, here we go, perspective again. 700,000, I know I'm underestimating now, 700,000 registered offenders. If they had 100 to 300 victims, there would be about 700 to 280 million victims. The U.S. only has about 300 million people. We only have 7 million minors. What the hell are we doing? We pass them along like Pokemon cards or what? You got to start looking at these numbers and putting them in the context of, put them against society. You have an outlandish claim like that, and you put it up against the number of Americans we actually have, and you'll see some really crazy stuff.
Mr. Logue, you are being very disingenuous with our audience today because you have forgot to mention the greatest fallacy of them all in your coverage, and that is 92 out of 100 victims never, ever report their crimes. You are a liar, sir.
That sounds so ironic coming out of the mouth of a media hound, but anyways, I know you guys have probably, how many of you guys saw this little graph earlier this year?
I've seen that.
Yes, it was, it was supposed to be, the intent, of course, was to try to, this little number down here, because you can't see it, even with this huge thing that's in tiny print, it's supposed to be the number of people falsely accused. This huge number right here is supposed to be the number of people who have raped, but have never been taken to task over it, and, you have little 10 people up there, jailed for all it and everything, and it went viral. So, lots of people saw this, and they accepted it. Here's this place called the Enliven Project. Sounds like a very, shady organization to me, but to a lot of people, they're not going to check and see what kind of organization this is. I can't remember what they were exactly, but they're not even related. They're just some I don't know, something that somebody made up out of thin air, I think. But the Range website repeats this myth. Only 3% of rapists ever serve a day in prison. The problem with an unknown factor is you could put any number greater than 0% and less than 100% and say that number is wrong. Can you prove it? Can you disprove it? You can't. I could say, like you say, most of them don't get reported. What's the number? What's most? We talk 90%, like that one claim, 90% plus. A lot of them claim, we don't have that's the thing, we can't. We try. The best example we have, the National Crime Victimization Survey. They do it every 2 years, pretty large survey. They get about 50, 60, 70,000 people involved in this sort of thing. It's a self-reporting study. And it's left up to you to determine whether you felt that you have had a certain crime committed against you that you may or may not have reported. So it's left up to an individual. So there's obviously a huge margin of error with self-reporting because a lot of people don't even know what rape is. We're having a huge debate in this country right now over what the definition of rape is. So if a person gets drunk and they wake up the next morning and the person laying next to them looks more like George Costanza than George Clooney, some people, I kid you not, it's a little hyperbolic here, but some people have actually looked at it. Well, I kind of had some regret sex, so does that count as rape? Some people say yes. So anyways, the one thing is the NCVS has shown that in the last few years, the number of underreporting has gone down. So it's 2010, it's only like 50%. Of course, they changed how they consolidated these two studies. So that's why there's a little bit of differences here. But it was more like 2/3 up top, in 2003, and then 50% down here. So there's more reporting, there's more awareness, there's less. But that begs the question, and nobody ever talks about this. Why is it being underreported? Anybody know? Well,
they say people are embarrassed and stuff, they don't report it.
the NCBS knows they have limitations. We're talking, the studies are being influenced by a ridiculously small amount of individuals. So you have 71,000 people, and out of them, you're talking about, you're talking about two numbers here, a 5 and a 7 next to each other. We're talking about a small number of people that are influencing what we believe to be unreporting rates for sex crimes in this country. And when, since we're talking about such a very small number here, if that number goes up or down, it greatly influences the percentages because it's a small sample. So why do people fail to report sex crimes? There's been a couple of studies on this. Even using a very broad definition, a lot of them say, well, I didn't feel like it was that important. it makes me, and of course, this is Harrison Hansen saying this. This isn't Derek Logue saying this. It says, consequently, readers may wonder what counts as a sexual assault. We don't even have a definite definition because it's always changing. Just like the example I used earlier, some people actually believe that regret sex is rape, and some people will argue you to death about it, and some people will say that it's not. It's being debated. In time, it may become part of the definition. So, that's going to be even more of a problem if you have individuals who like to go to bars and then take somebody home with them, because technically, under the law, you cannot consent to sex if you're inebriated. So, that could cause some huge problems down the road for individuals who like to go out and party. There's a huge discrepancy on why people do not report when there's a stranger involved versus when a person who's not a stranger involved. It's an acquaintance or something. When a stranger is involved, as you see, some of it's because they don't have much trust in the cops. Somebody says report it to another official. I wonder what they mean by that, reported it to another official. I mean, do they mean like you talk to a doctor, or did you talk to somebody did you talk to a hitman? I don't know. I don't understand what they mean by that. But I notice all of a sudden it's a lot different. When it's a friend and acquaintance, all of a sudden you got a lot of individuals handling it their own way. This is a personal matter. Uncle Earl, we took him out back, or something like that, and gave him the whatnot, gave him the business. I don't know what you guys call it, Dad, what you guys call it in your area, but all of a sudden it changes. So when a family member is involved, the whole dynamic of sex offenses change. With a stranger, it's easy to go after the person, and it's a lot easier to report it. But when it's somebody you love, then it changes the whole dynamic, and it's something that we really don't address much. And even the victim side of this argument does not address that hardly at all. It's a huge thing.
Mr. Logue, the thing that worries people the most is the fact that we have 100,000 registered sex offenders missing off the registry. Now that gives me the willies, and I think most of my radio listeners would agree we've got a national crisis under our circumstances here.
Yes. And it seems that Mr. Blathers has 100 missing hairs on his head. Today, you've heard this wonderful myth. It's for some strange reason, this number is so magical that for some reason it has not changed in over 11 years now. It's like a constant. It was created in 2002. All right, brownie points to anybody who can tell me which child victim advocate group this came from. Anybody?
My good friend Walsh.
Nope.
Laura?
This girl right here, Laura Ahern. 2002 Parents for Megan's Law survey, which for some reason Laura Ahern will not release the methodology of how she came up with this. It was supposedly she called all these places, and a lot of people said that they gave estimates because nobody back then in 2002, a lot of states did not bother. So for some strange reason, this myth has been very prevailing, and I just love that graphic. I think it's hilarious, especially like with her grabbing all the money and stuff. I had somebody do that for me. I love that graphic. It just cracks me up every time I see it. Of course, what do they mean by missing sex offenders? Are they talking about actually missing, like literally, like, we're going to put them on a milk carton or something missing? Or do they mean non-compliant? Or are they talking about fugitives, evading authorities, or absconding? Here's another wonderful survey that has yet another familiar face, name in it. Here's another Levinson study. Seems like that woman's all over the place these days. So she did this big study here a couple of years ago, 2011, so it was barely 2 years ago, and she broke it down for us nice and easy here. Adding absconded, missing, and failure to register cases. Out of 445,000 people, she got 10,000, or about 2.4%. A lot lower than 100,000. 10,000, way lower than 100,000. Even if you took the homeless registrants. and added them to that number, you still would not even get close to 100,000. Nowhere even near. You know, and of course, you know, this is, I'm sort of going off on a slight tangent here, but failure to register. People make such a big deal out of failure to register. There's a little mini myth in regards to that, and it goes something like this. If somebody fails to register, then they're probably failing to register so they can go out and molest children. Not true. Levinson again, I know she just keeps popping up, doesn't she? Failure to register offenders were no more likely to have sexually assaulted a stranger. You know, they could find no proof that people failed to register because they're looking to evade detection to commit sex crimes. If anything, they probably just got annoyed and got tired of all this registration nonsense. You know, it's probably the most likely case. But see, they're not going to say stuff like that. You know, but
All right, Mr. Logue, let's try this one more time. Let's change the subject this time. Let's talk about the internet, the great new frontier of lack of safety out there. We all know that. My good friend Chris Hansen, of the To Catch a Predator fame, tells me frequently that internet predators are everywhere by the millions. What do you say now, Mr. Know-It-All?
Internet predators. Yeah, this is one of the newer myths that's out there, and you know, as he mentioned, Chris Hansen is solely responsible for the wonderful 50,000 internet predator myth. Unfortunately, it's sort of grown zero since the last time that anybody's talked about this subject. All of a sudden, it's jumped up to like 500,000. You know, between the last number, the 100,000 missing sex offenders, and the internet predators myth, we call it the Goldilocks number. You know, not too high, not too low. It's just right. I did not come up with that, by the way. I got this, you know, I got this off the, you know, from. You know, Brooke Gladstone, that's the lady right there. So, you know, that's a clip out of one of these books that she wrote. And, you know, this 50,000 number had been used so many times over the years. Korean War casualties, deaths and annual deaths from secondhand smoke, number of children allegedly sacrificed to Satan every year. Remember the satanic ritual abuse scares in the 1980s? 50,000 children a year were given sacrificed to the devil, although the murder rate in the United States is less than 20,000. The actual online child sex crime arrests, 615 arrests for actual contact between stranger people meeting underage people online, which were usually teenagers. Most of the time you get a scenario like this, FBI agent here posing as a you know, posing as a teen, you know, those stupid To Catch a Predator type stuff. So for every actual arrest, and I'm sure that the numbers are probably even more, you know, there's probably even more of the police than actual incidents of solicitation with, you know, with all the attention that they get now. So, you know, a lot of times you're seeing a lot of, you know, stings rather than this. Here's a few more myths, just, you know, machine gun through a few of these. 1 in 5 children who use a computer chat room has been approached by a pedophile. You know, 30% of young people consider an online encounter, while 14% have already met in person. So they claim that 1 out of 7 have met people online. Then the third one here just essentially says that people, you know, that sex predators lie about their ages. First of all, the 1 in 5 stat is a misread. It comes from the Internet Use Safety Survey. It said 19% experienced a raw sexual solicitation. Anything could be sexual spam, somebody asking if a person got lucky on a date, for example. You know, it's, you know, it's a pretty mundane thing. You know, only 1 in 3 experienced an aggressive sexual solicitation, which is a request to meet offline, and half of them came from juveniles, other kids. So, you know, to assume that, you know, the scenario is, you know, 55-year-old man running off a 13-year-old girl, it makes for good news, but it's not. But it's a rare, like everything else, it's rare. It's not reality. You know, there's a huge difference between that and, you know, 13-year-olds meeting other 13-year-olds and talking dirty. You know, I mean, it's, You know, here's the, this particular study came from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Yeah, so you can imagine how unbiased this is going to be. But they claim that 14% have actually met face-to-face with a person they had known only through the internet. Of course, they never discuss who they meet. The survey just says they met somebody offline. They could have met another teenager. They could have met a kid from a rival school. It does not say. It just says, hey, you know, 22% of 6-year-olds and 9% of 13 to 15-year-olds. So it seems to be more of an issue with older children. The older they get, the more they're willing to meet somebody offline. You know, another thing too is that the most accurate study, like a 2012 study of this, if they found lower numbers, they're never going to quote those. They will go back to the highest number. They love shopping for the highest number that they can find, and they stick with it. Maybe that's why that 100,000 sex offenders missing thing, you know, stays the same year in and year out. But you know, let's look at some characteristics of so-called internet predators. They rarely pretend to be teenagers. Most people have been on the up and up. You know, there's not a lot of lying going on, surprisingly enough, because it's the internet. We all lie about something. Or maybe that's just a stereotype too. You know, there's not a lot of violence involved. There's a lot of willing participation. So it's a lot, you know, there's not a lot of force. You know, nobody's getting threatened. You know, not too many people are getting threatened. Not to say that, you know, there's not those rare instances that it happens. But if you're going to try to teach your children about what to watch out for, you know, you got to watch out. You know, you have to show them like some reasonable boundaries as opposed to like scaring them and say, hey, you know, here's this scary-looking guy with a scar on his face is going to, you know, get all your stuff and you know, and scare you into submitting. No, it's not how it goes down. You know, you have to also look at the characteristics of the individuals that are being solicited. There are individuals who are more high risk than others. You know, troubled children, you know, people who are more willing to discuss some things like sexual stuff. You know, those are things that you got to watch out for. You know, that's just a quote. You know, we're starting to get a little short on time, but basically it just said what I just went through. That's a good one. You know, if anybody wants to write that one down later on, I'll come back to it.
Wrap it up, Mr. Logue. Just wrap it up. I'm done. Wrap it up. You win. Go ahead. You win.
How much time I got left here? What time is it?
6 minutes.
I got 6 minutes. I'm gonna have to machine gun through these. Okay. Tough on crime. You know, the tougher. You know, obviously we know all about tough on crime. Tougher laws mean less sex offenders. Not necessarily true. You know, reoffense rates, you see this is this line right here is the date that Megan's Law came into effect. This is a recidivism chart, just for illustrative purposes. As you can see, there hasn't been, you know, I think it's kind of funny that some of these years look a little higher than some of these years over here, but your recidivists are way down here. No real change. It looks kind of flat, you know, because it's not really changing. Sex offenders have no positive impact on crime, but the effects of the law can increase crime. Registration has found that, you know, SORA has no impact on the rates of sexual offenses. With residency restriction laws, just remember Iowa. Iowa in 2005 created what was at the time the most restrictive sex offender laws in the country. Within a year, sex crime arrests went up. Failure to register cases went up. Of course, you know, you got lots more arrests for violating residency restrictions. You had people who fled the state or simply stopped registering. And after that happened, Iowa scaled back residency restrictions for everybody except for the highest tier offenders. And since then, a lot of that has gone down. Except for those in the highest tier, they still have the same problems. There was too many places cited, so I just kind of refer you guys to my residency restriction laws page on that if you want to know more about that. The Adam Walsh Act, of course, you know, they've done, you know, long story short, so you don't have to read all this stuff, is studies have found the Adam Walsh Act, the tier levels that the Adam Walsh Act does has no impact on, as a matter of fact, they kind of found a converse effect, like the high-risk registrants were actually less likely to reoffend than the low-risk registrants. Because the Adam Walsh Act does everything completely backwards. than risk assessments. Risk assessments were bad, but add them all. And of course, I don't need to tell you that sex offender laws promote social ostracism and vigilante violence. I won't make you read all this stuff, you know, I just threw it, you know, but we already know this stuff. These are just different quotes saying the same thing over and over again. And it just simply says that, you know, social ostracism, denial of jobs and services, vigilante violence, you know, harassment by the neighbors, makes a person less stable, and a less stable offender is a more dangerous offender, simply put. This one's a really short one, slap on the wrist. You've heard this one a million times. Oh, you know, they don't get it, they don't serve enough time, you know. You can go to prison for drugs for longer than for a sex crime. Not true. Here's a good little chart here. Child pornography cases, as you can see, it's going up and up. Drug offenders, where's drugs? They're going down and down. You know, simply not true. Average sex offender gets more time on than anybody than a murderer. Last one here. Megan's Law raises awareness. That was one that Maureen Kanka said after the New York State study. There's a watch pot boil. That's one you really need to be familiar with. But she was basically backpedaled and said, well, you know, it's not about preventing sex crimes, it's just to raise awareness. Well, guess what? I actually have some statistics that show you why people use the registry. Here's a 2005 Gallup poll that found that, first of all, only for some strange reason, despite the fact that people are always talking about this crap, only 38% of individuals have ever claimed to know that the registry exists. And of those, you know, only 23% of people look at the registry. So, you know, Florida has an email program, and they found only 44,000 people have signed up for their email alerts. That's, you know, considering that 16 million people live in Florida, and Florida's like a hot spot for this stuff. Nobody's paying much attention to it. You know, here's a very recent study that came out on the registry and why people use the registry. And the thing that I want to, you know, the main one I want you to take away from this one is why people use the registry. 40% of respondents did it just out of curiosity. You ever see those stupid mugshot magazines that you go to a convenience store and they're sitting there $1 busted, or you know, mugshots.com or whatever. People buy these things, you know, and they look and they're like, oh man, Uncle Jimmy's in here. What did he do? You know, some people do. I mean, it's a curiosity thing. Few people were looking at it because they were actually worried about their safety. You know, you had more people who were looking at it as a freak show than looking at it as a serious tool. So, you know, few people were accessing it. You know, almost 20% only looked at it one time. Just had, you know, a couple came back once. Only 38.1% used it on a regular basis. You know, of course, that's the same thing. You know, just machine gunning a few really quick myths here. Halloween's coming up. You've heard this one. Good study to know. Jill Leveson's study. You know, they found no Halloween effect. Halloween has no impact on sex crimes. Real simple. You know, if you guys need that one, I'll put that one back later on. Child trafficking. This is going to be, to me, I've been trying to sound an alarm to everybody for the last few years now. This is going to be the thing that drives a lot of laws. In California, residents, you guys know about this already, because last year when they passed that stupid child trafficking law here, and they added a provision to force registrants to use their internet to turn over their internet identifiers, and thankfully that got stopped. But you know, they're going to start piggybacking a lot of things. They're doing this also. Anybody who saw the registered traveler earlier today, they're piggybacking a law to force registrants to renew their passports more frequently as being attached to a child trafficking bill. So now you see 100,000 to 300,000 child sex slaves in the U.S. today. Complete misprint. Long story short, you know, I went all the way back to a study that came from ACPAT, which is an organization that's connected to the United Nations, and it deals with child sex trafficking. They cannot, it's another estimate. And guess what? They do not have the original study. They cannot find it. I have been in contact with ECPAT for the last 3 months and nobody can find the study. It does not exist. And of course, you know, tied into that was the big Super Bowl. You know, now the Super Bowl, they're going to have, you saw the hoopla over that a couple of years ago, that all these people were going to flock to the Super Bowl for sex trafficking. They found 16 people. Must not have been that super of a bowl. You know, I want to take the last couple of, we're finally in the home stretch here, so, you know, I want to, you know, just do a little, you know, do a couple of small tips to kind of help you guys out, so that way you don't have to listen to somebody like me. You can become your own Mythbuster. And hopefully you'll get a magnifying glass and not a mirror like old Mr. Holder here. First of all, consider the source. University studies tend to be the best. Not to say they're perfect, there's some bad ones. They're better than media reports. Media reports are still better than victim industry advocates. A John Walsh study is probably not the kind of study that you want to ever quote. You know, there's a few media polls. You know, media polls are not as good as, you know, some of these, you know, Pew Center, Gallup, Rand Corp. You know, they're professionals. Not to say they never screw up, because sometimes they put some bad ones out there too. But they're better than media polls, especially online polls. And, you know, online polls can be manipulated pretty easily. We probably have done that ourselves from time to time. You know, watch it. If a study comes out, especially a very controversial one, watch for criticisms. The Butner study came out a few years ago. You remember that's the one that claimed that 85% of people in federal prison for child pornography charges also touched a child. The Butner study was debunked twice in the same year. And even the Department of Prisons, the Bureau of Prisons, said that the study was invalid, did not use it. They wanted it suppressed. Watch for estimates. Round number, nice round numbers, 100,000, 50,000. 1 in stats, 1 in 10. 1 in 10 stats are wrong, you know. Goldilocks numbers. You know, media reports are really notorious about misreading a report. A couple weeks ago, there was a study that came out from Nebraska, and the media report got the numbers backwards. And they said that the Adam Walsh Act did a better job of reducing recidivism, because recidivism rates went from 2.5% to 0.5% in Nebraska after the Adam Walsh Act passed. That's not what the study says. The study says that the pre-Adam Walsh recidivism rate was 0.5% and the post-Adam Walsh Act was 2.5%. The media reporter got it flat wrong. He got the numbers backwards. Keep everything in perspective. This is what I mentioned before. You know, big numbers are scary. Bigger numbers put those other numbers into perspective. Actually read the source. Who's the author? Where is this coming from? Don't always take the media at face value. Especially people like Blathers. He can't read nothing. He's got 4 eyes and it doesn't even help him. You know, if you take a minute to look at a study, you know, anything before the 1990s, everything's kind of changed in the 1990s. We're getting a lot better about determining, you know, statistics and stuff like that. Anything before the 1990s, it's completely different. You know, at some point you got to retire some of that old stuff. Things change. Sample size. You're going to quote a sample. You're going to quote a study where the sample size is 5 people, and you're going to say that 100% of people reoffend because I talked to 5 of them and all 5 of them reoffend. Well, that's a pretty small sample. I mean, you know, if only one of them reoffended, that's still 20%. That's still a ridiculously high number. You know, brush up on your math and semantics. You got to know the means and medians, semantic arguments. You got to know the difference between predator and pedophile and regular sex offender, time savers. You know, if you don't want to read the whole study, and who does, most of the time the abstract gives you the information that you need. You know, the abstract and the conclude. You know, the results. You know, I already mentioned looking out for critiques. Arm yourself against the logical fallacies. If you ever have a media interview, the best thing you can do protect yourself, you know, to make sure that you have, you know, give a good interview is to practice. You know, Tom has been playing Mr. Bill Blathers this entire program. You know, to kind of, you know, it was you know, I asked him to do this because, you know, you're hearing what the media loves to do to you. They love to come to you and say and really try to grill you. They want to see your head. You know, they want that deer in the headlight stare. You know, they want you to look blindsided when they try to slam you with something. So when you know you're going to be talked to, when the media is going to come talk to you about something, think of a couple of sound bites you have in your head. You know, those sex offenders, they have high recidivism rates. You know, put a couple sound bites together. Well, you know, dozens of university and state studies have found that sex offenders have a consistently low rate of recidivism, and that recidivism rate is lowered even further with successful treatment programs. Nice little 10-second sound bite. You know, it's effective because, you know, lots of times you're not going to get a lot of time. Even if they sat and talked to you for an hour, you're going to see yourself on TV for 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes tops. So it's always good to have a couple of ideas in your head. Stick to them. Do not deviate from them. You know, I'm bad about this, so I'm preaching to myself when I'm saying this. Don't rely solely on this. All this stuff I talked about, I overwhelmed you guys with a lot of stats today, but that's only part of the argument because, again, there's all those fallacies. One child, if it saves just one child, it's all worth it. We've heard that so many times. And you got to think about what can we say as a response to that. You know, and I don't have all the answers. You know, this is where it really gets tough. It's easy to break down a myth like I've done because you have definitive proof. It's not as easy to do it with emotion because there's no gauge for the emotion. I can't tell a grieving widow, you know, that it's a 1 in a million thing that happened to that person. You know, it happened. So, you know, there's other ways. You know, using emotional testimony is not in itself a fallacy. Just because the other side uses it an awful lot, doesn't mean we don't have a story to tell as well. You know, we have people who are suffering under these registries. We're suffering, you know, not just me, but anybody who loves me, my family, my friends. I have to put my life in perspective. You know, I have to do certain things because of them. So, you know, we all have a story to tell. Fight fire with fire, emotion with emotion. And what the hell did I just do? Oh, there we go. Know your enemy. Real short. You know, this is pretty self-explanatory. If you're going on Dr. Phil and they say you're up against, you know, you're up against Betty Logston from, you know, she's from mommycare.com. Go to mommycare.com and see what kind of stuff she writes. See what her, you know, you got to study up on this person because, you know, sometimes the most dangerous individuals are the ones that don't really know what the heck they're talking about. They're just going to throw some random stuff. They're really hard to deal with. You know, with somebody like Lunsford or Walsh, they would be easy to debunk because I've got all the facts. You know, sometimes it doesn't hurt to confront them. Turn the tables on them. You don't have to be nasty about it, but you put them on the spot. You say 90% recidivism rate? Where did you get that from? Do you know what a pedophile is? No. Then why are you saying it? You don't know what a pedophile is. You shouldn't even use the word. You know, well, here I go, hit the wrong note. Accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. Again, all about perspective. We keep saying, okay, sex offenders have a high 5% recidivism rate. No. Over 95% of registrants never reoffend. Sounds a lot better, doesn't it? It really, you know, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but in a person's mind, you know, that big number is the one that counts. That huge number, because they use those, they love those huge numbers. The numbers are on our side, not theirs. All you have to do is, you know your sources. If you want all the sources that I've written and you haven't been able to write all this stuff down because I've kind of been machine gunning through all this stuff, I will be more than happy to share all this stuff with you. I'll also have it on my website. You know your sources. If somebody challenges you, you can say, okay, I may not have it at the moment, but I will get it for you. I know the source. You can say, okay, I got it from the Levinson study, or I got it from the U.S. Department of Justice. And you could, ask them, and where's their sources? I don't have them. And they never have them. There was the Butner study, there was the, I'll use, I want to show you, just before we quit, and this is the last one, I promise. This one came out early this year. It said, it came out about this time last year. It said 1 in 6 sex offenders are intentionally manipulating data to hide in plain sight. It came from the Utica College in New York State, and they claim that, can I get one more minute? But they claim that, they claim that 1 in 6 of us are intentionally hiding our identities. The guy is not a criminologist. He's a data analyst. The study is unavailable for review. Preliminary findings find ways that sex offenders avoid detection. Using multiple aliases, using various identification, stealing info, manipulating either their own name or change their name through marriage. So if you got women, if we got any cute sex offender ladies in here and y'all got married, y'all did that just to try to avoid the registry. So y'all screwed these numbers up for us. So it's your fault. Using the address of family members of friends. So apparently if you live with your family, they consider that trying to hide from the registry. Altering your physical appearance. Well, some of you guys know I used to have some facial hair here a few months ago. Well, I started getting a little gray right down here. I'm not 25 years old anymore, so I kind of shaved it off. I just altered my physical appearance. Moving to other states with less stringent laws. There we go. That's another myth for another day, but I'm sure I burned out some brains here, so I overwhelmed you with some information. But trust me, we don't state shop. If we were state shopping, why are there so many sex offenders in Florida?
Yeah, you're not.